You probably spent this coin without thinking twice, but this 10-cent Canada piece could be more than just change. And if you know what to look for, it can completely change how you see your pocket money. This small 10-cent Canada coin is something most people ignore completely. But collectors don't, because sometimes the smallest coins hide the biggest surprises in the entire coin world. If you have this coin in your pocket, or even in an old jar at home, you might be holding something far more interesting than just 10 cents. Because sometimes the smallest coins carry the biggest stories. And today we're diving deep into one of Canada's most overlooked pieces, the 1989 Canadian 10-cent coin. At first glance, it looks completely ordinary. A small silver-colored coin, light in your hand, easy to ignore, the kind of change people spend without even thinking. But what if I told you that coins like this have sparked curiosity among collectors for decades? What if I told you that some versions, under the right conditions, have turned into surprisingly valuable collectibles? And what if the coin sitting in your drawer right now is one of them? To understand why, we need to step back into Canada in the late 1980s, a time when the country was stable, growing, and modernizing its currency system. The Royal Canadian Mint was producing millions of coins for everyday use, and the 10-cent piece, also known as the dime, played a key role in daily transactions. It wasn't meant to be rare. It wasn't meant to be special. It was meant to move through hands quickly, from wallets to vending machines to cash registers, unnoticed. But history has a strange habit. Sometimes the most common objects become fascinating decades later. The 1989 Canadian dime features one of the most iconic designs in Canadian coinage history. On the reverse side, you'll find the famous Bluenose schooner, a legendary racing ship that represents Canada's maritime heritage. This ship isn't just decoration. It symbolizes pride, craftsmanship, and the deep connection Canada has with its coastal history. The sails are sharp, the water beneath it dynamic, almost alive, as if the ship is cutting through waves even while frozen in metal. On the front side, you'll see the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, as Canada was, and still is, a Commonwealth nation. The portrait used during that era shows her in a mature profile, symbolizing stability and continuity. Around her are inscriptions marking her title and the year 1989, quietly anchoring this coin in time. Now here's where things get interesting. Most people assume coins like this are worthless because they were mass-produced. And in general, they are extremely common. Millions upon millions were minted. You could probably find one in circulation, even today, if you looked carefully enough. But in the world of coin collecting, rarity is not always about how many were made. Sometimes it's about what went wrong during production. Mint errors, unusual strikes, off-center prints, double dies, or coins struck on the wrong metal planchets can transform an ordinary coin into something extraordinary. And while the standard 1989 Canadian 10-cent coin is common, certain rare variations and high-grade specimens can attract serious attention from collectors. Imagine this: a coin that looks identical to yours, but under magnification reveals a subtle doubling in the lettering. Or a coin that escaped circulation completely, preserved in near-perfect condition for over 3 decades. In the world of numismatics, condition is everything. A coin that has never been touched by human hands after minting can be many times more valuable than one that has been worn down in everyday use. Collectors often grade coins on a scale, and even a slight difference in grade can dramatically change value. A regular circulated 1989 dime might still be worth only its face value, 10 cents. But a pristine, uncirculated example, especially one with a special grading certification, can attract strong collector interest. And then there are the myths that circulate online. Stories of coins like this being sold for thousands or even tens of thousands. The truth is more grounded, but still exciting. While a standard 1989 Canadian dime is not a high-value rarity, certain exceptional error coins or top-grade certified pieces can sell for significantly more than face value in specialized auctions. Not millions, not even close to extreme viral claims, but enough to surprise anyone who assumed it was just pocket change. Now think about how many of these coins have passed through human hands since 1989. Billions of transactions. Coffee shops, bus fares, store counters, lost change jars. Most of them are gone forever into circulation history. But a few may have survived untouched, sitting quietly in collections or forgotten containers. And that is where the thrill of coin collecting begins, not in guaranteed treasure, but in possibility. There is something deeply emotional about holding a coin like this and realizing it has lived through decades of history. This coin has seen the world change from analog to digital. It has existed through the rise of the internet, smartphones, and global transformation. It may have been dropped on counters in the 1990s, carried in pockets during everyday errands, or stored away without a second thought. Yet here it is, still around. Collectors often describe this feeling as a kind of time travel, not because the coin is magical, but because it is physical history, a direct object from a different era that you can hold in your hand. Now, if you're checking your own coin right now, here's what matters most. First, look at its condition. Is it shiny, almost untouched, with sharp details on the ship and Queen's portrait? Or is it worn down from years of circulation? Second, check for anything unusual, misalignment, odd coloring, or striking errors. Even tiny imperfections can sometimes catch collector interest. But most importantly, understand this. The real value of coins like the 1989 Canadian dime is not always measured in money. It's measured in discovery, in curiosity, in the excitement of realizing that everyday objects can carry hidden stories. Still, let's talk about value in the real world. For most people, this coin will remain worth exactly 10 cents in everyday use. But for collectors, especially those searching for high-grade or rare error examples, it can reach a much higher price depending on demand, certification, and auction competition. In niche collecting circles, even small coins like this can surprise sellers when the right buyer appears at the right time. That's the unpredictable nature of coin collecting. It's not just about metal and numbers, it's about people, passion, and timing. So if you were expecting a guaranteed treasure story, the truth is more grounded. But if you were looking for something even better, a real understanding of how ordinary coins become extraordinary in the eyes of collectors, then this is where the real value lies. Because somewhere out there in a drawer, a box, or an old jar, there might be a 1989 Canadian 10-cent coin that hasn't been looked at in years. And the next time someone picks it up, they might not just see change. They might see history. If you have this coin in your hand right now, you might be looking at something far more interesting than just 10 cents. Because the 1986 Canadian 10 cents coin is one of those pieces that looks ordinary, but carries a surprising story behind it that most people never notice. At first sight, it seems simple. A small, silver-colored dime, easy to ignore, easy to spend, and found in everyday change across Canada during the 1980s. Millions were produced, and that's exactly why most people assume it has no real value beyond face value. But in the world of coin collecting, things are never that simple. If you have this coin, you are the luckiest person in this world. Not because it is always rare, but because it connects you to a fascinating era of Canadian minting history that many collectors still study today. Back in 1986, Canada was using a coin system that had already become iconic. The Royal Canadian Mint was producing coins with incredible detail and consistency. The 10 cents piece, also known as the dime, featured one of the most recognizable designs in world numismatics, the famous Blue Nose sailing ship on the reverse side. This ship is not just decoration. It represents pride, speed, and Canada's maritime legacy. The waves beneath it, the wind in its sails, and the precision of the engraving all tell a story of national identity. On the front, you see Queen Elizabeth II, a portrait that symbolizes Canada's connection to the Commonwealth and its constitutional monarchy. In 1986, this portrait was widely used across Canadian currency, marking a stable and consistent design era that collectors now easily recognize. But what makes the 1986 dime interesting is not just its design. It's what can happen during production and preservation over time. Most of these coins entered circulation immediately. They were used in vending machines, exchanged in shops, dropped in parking meters, and carried in pockets without a second thought. Because of this heavy circulation, the majority of surviving coins today show signs of wear. Scratches, fading details, and softened features are extremely common. However, in coin collecting, condition changes everything. A coin that appears sharp, clean, and untouched, even if it is common, can become desirable to collectors. This is because grading plays a major role in numismatics. Coins are evaluated based on their preservation, and even a small difference in surface quality can separate a normal coin from a collectible piece. Now imagine finding a 1986 Canadian dime that looks like it was never used, still shining, with sharp details on the ship's sails and perfectly visible lines on the Queen's portrait. That kind of preservation is not impossible, but it is rare in circulation. And then there are minting variations. While the standard coin is common, collectors sometimes look for unusual characteristics, slight errors, off-center strikes, or unusual surface variations. These are not guaranteed, but when they appear, they attract attention in the collecting community. This is where excitement builds. Because every time someone checks an old coin jar, there is always that small possibility, not certainty, but possibility, that something unusual might appear. And that possibility is what keeps collectors searching. Think about how many of these coins have passed through hands since 1986. Million upon million. Most are gone, worn out, or forgotten. But a few remain untouched, sitting quietly in collections or storage boxes, waiting to be noticed again. And that is why coin collecting is so powerful. It turns everyday objects into historical artifacts. This coin has witnessed decades of change. It has existed through technological revolutions, economic shifts, and global transformation. Yet it remains physically unchanged, a small piece of metal carrying history across time. Now let's talk about value, because this is what everyone wants to know. For most people, the 1986 Canadian 10-cent coin is still worth exactly its face value, 10 cents. In normal circulated condition, there is no major premium. It is a common coin, and it will likely remain that way. But in the collector market, things change when condition or rarity factors improve. High-grade examples, especially those professionally certified in near-perfect condition, can attract interest from collectors who build date sets or type sets of Canadian coinage. In competitive collecting environments, even small differences can influence pricing. There are also cases where unusual mint errors or exceptionally preserved specimens have been sold in numismatic circles at significantly higher prices than face value. Not because the coin itself is inherently rare, but because collectors compete for quality and uniqueness. And sometimes, that competition is what creates surprising value. This is why auctions matter so much in the coin world. At auction, two collectors might want the same coin to complete a collection, and that demand can push prices higher than expected. It is not guaranteed, and it does not happen with every coin, but when it does, it becomes memorable in the collecting community. Still, the real lesson is not just about money. It's about awareness. Because most people walk past coins like this every day without ever looking closely. They don't notice the design, the history, or the craftsmanship. But once you start paying attention, even a simple dime starts to feel different. It becomes more than currency. It becomes a story. So if you ever find a 1986 Canadian 10 cents coin in your pocket, don't rush to spend it. Take a moment. Look at it closely. Check its condition. Notice the details. Because while most will always remain common, a few can still surprise you in ways you don't expect. And that is the quiet magic of coin collecting. Sometimes the smallest coin in your hand carries the biggest story you never noticed before. If you have this coin in your hand right now, stop for a moment because the 1969 Canadian 10 cents coin is one of those pieces that looks simple but carries a deeper story than most people ever realize. At first glance, it is just a small dime. Nothing flashy, nothing rare-looking. The kind of coin that has been used in everyday life across Canada for decades. People spent it on coffee, dropped it in parking meters, and tossed it into change jars without ever thinking twice. But here's the truth that collectors know very well. Even the most ordinary-looking coin can hold surprising historical and collectible value. If you have this coin, you are the luckiest person in this world because you are holding a piece of Canada's late 1960s monetary history, a time when coin production was reaching extremely high volumes, but also subtle variations that today interest collectors worldwide. The 1969 Canadian dime belongs to one of the most iconic design eras in Canadian coinage. On the reverse side, it features the famous Blue Nose sailing ship. This ship is not just a design, it is a national symbol. The Blue Nose represents Canada's maritime strength, fishing heritage, and competitive spirit. The engraving is incredibly detailed for such a small coin. The sails are full. The ship appears to be moving through waves, and the craftsmanship reflects the Royal Canadian Mint's precision during that period. On the obverse side, you see Queen Elizabeth II, whose portrait was used throughout Canadian currency for many years. This connects the coin to the Commonwealth tradition and gives it a strong historical identity. The year 1969 sits quietly below, marking a period of economic growth and modernization in Canada. Now here's where things get interesting. The 1969 dime was produced in very large numbers, which means most examples are not rare in circulation. You can still find them in old collections or mixed coin jars. But coin collecting is not only about rarity in numbers. It is about condition, preservation, and special characteristics that make certain coins stand out. Most 1969 dimes you find today are heavily circulated. Over time, these coins have passed through countless hands. They have been used in daily transactions for decades, which means their surfaces are often worn, the ship details are softened, and the Queen's portrait loses sharpness. But occasionally, something different appears. A coin that was never used in circulation. A coin stored carefully for decades. A coin that still has its original mint luster, with sharp, clean details that look almost untouched. In numismatics, this kind of preservation can significantly increase interest from collectors. And then there's the world of minting variations. Even though most 1969 Canadian dimes are standard, collectors sometimes search for unusual characteristics, minor errors, off-center strikes, or subtle differences in strike quality. These are not common, but when they appear, they can attract attention in the coin community because they represent something different from the mass production process. This is why experienced collectors always say, never judge a coin only by its face value, because a coin like this has lived through more than 50 years of history. It has existed through major global changes, technological revolutions, and economic shifts, yet it still remains physically in circulation or in collections today. That alone makes it a small historical artifact. Think about it. Every 1969 dime has a journey. Some were lost, some were melted down, some were saved by collectors, and a few are still sitting quietly in old boxes, forgotten but intact. Now let's talk about value, because this is the part everyone is curious about. In normal circulated condition, the 1969 Canadian 10-cent coin is still worth face value, 10 cents. There is no automatic premium just because of the year. It is considered a common circulation coin. However, in the collector market, condition changes everything. Coins that are in extremely high grades, especially those that appear uncirculated or have been professionally certified, can attract more attention from collectors building date sets or high-grade collections. And if a coin shows a genuine mint error or unusual production feature, it can sometimes sell for higher prices in numismatic markets or specialized auctions, where collectors compete to complete sets or acquire unique pieces. The final price is always driven by demand, rarity of condition, and collector interest at that moment. This is where auctions play an important role in the coin world. At auction, coins are not just sold, they are competed for. Two collectors might want the same high-grade example, and that competition can increase the final selling price beyond expectations. That is how even common coins sometimes achieve surprising results. But it is important to stay grounded. Not every coin is a hidden treasure. Most remain what they are, everyday currency from a past era. Still, that does not make them meaningless. Because the real value of the 1969 Canadian dime is not only financial. It is historical. It is educational. It It is emotional for collectors who understand what it represents. A small piece of metal that has traveled through decades of human life. So if you find this coin in an old drawer, a forgotten jar, or inside a collection, don't rush past it. Look closely. Observe the details. Feel its history. Because while most will always remain worth just 10 cents, a few special ones, in the right condition or with unique characteristics, can surprise you in ways you never expected. And that is the real magic of coin collecting. Even the smallest coin can hold the biggest story.